I am Mother Alicia. Some of you know me, and some of you don't. I am the assistant rector at Grace Episcopal Church down in Holland, but St. John's is my home parish. I was invited to come among you almost exactly 11 years ago on November 2nd of 2012, when now retired organist and choir master John Bryson sent me an email asking me if I would sing in the St. Cecilia Choir. So it is my deep joy to be with you this morning while Jared is serving elsewhere. A little birdie told me that last week your rector preached about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Wow. Really, though. I know that you've been kind of steeped in the words of Isaiah, and so I'm going to keep us right there, mostly, this morning. We know that Isaiah contains 66 chapters. The 25th chapter, a portion of which we heard a few minutes ago, was probably written in retrospect, at the end of the exile, and is sometimes called Isaiah's little apocalypse, because it has this kind of eschatological bent, meaning it envisions and it calls down to us an image of the end of all of this. The end of our fighting and our bloodlust, the end of our wars and the hunger of our children. Because make no mistake, every child is ours, collectively, to care for. God's banquet includes all. The table is long and it is groaning under the weight of good food, and all are called to come and eat. We also think that more than just one person wrote Isaiah, mostly because it was compiled over a period of about 200 years. Authors would dip in from time to time to edit the story, to color it in a little more, and of course to add what happened next. Each author got to add their own part of the narrative, telling the story of God's people in prose and poetry. But I think the last writer had it best, because the last writer had the entire book to look back on, and in which to insert their own theological threads. The last author, I think, looked back over this long, long story and decided that the golden threads in the tapestry were made of hope, of a story of a God who never left God's people. Chapters 1 through 12 of Isaiah are all about the judgment that is coming to Jerusalem because of corrupt leaders who commit idolatry and who mostly oppress the poor. Isaiah says that God will judge Israel in the form of war from other nations, and he compares this to a purifying fire. But there is still hope in these chapters. Isaiah describes all people coming back to Jerusalem and a reigning God who will bring about peace and reconciliation. In chapter 7, Isaiah brings us many of the Advent readings that we're familiar with. The shoot emerging from the chopped-down stump, and the sending of a new king, who will be called Emmanuel, God with us. We're near the end of the second portion of Isaiah today, comprised of chapters 13 to 27. In the poems that make up this section, we learn about the defeat to Assyria and Babylon, and Isaiah has what we could almost call a naughty list of other nations who will be brought to account too. Philistia, Moab, Damascus, Egypt, Cush. Isaiah says they are all guilty of the same sins Jerusalem was guilty of, and warns that God is angry and that God will act, but he doesn't leave us there. The end of this section includes the lection today, a vision once more of God's reconciling justice, of all people blended together as one, in a place where death is overcome and tears are wiped away. I think Isaiah is telling us God's dream for us, which is a shiny and hopeful thread for us to pick at for just a few minutes. As tens of thousands of Venezuelans crowd at our southern border, as Hamas and Israel continue to destroy Gaza, and almost 2,000, as of 10 o'clock last night, are dead. As wars rage around the world, even right here in our own town, people and families are living in tents and in cars, and they're wondering how in the world they're going to make it through the winter. I don't know if you've ever been camping in the rain, but I have. And I sure did think, where is the fun in this? And how do I dry anything out? And where is the hope? I think a good place to start in that looking for hope might be the psalm that we almost always hear at funerals, but rarely on Sunday morning. God is laying another table, another banquet. Our cups are described as running over. Our tired and our road-worn feet are resting, and our heads are drenched with sweet-smelling oil. And though the valley is dark, and it is full of wolves, and those who are hungry for power and dominion, the psalm proclaims that our shepherd is with us to protect and to care for us. We recite this psalm at funerals because on those days and in those weeks and months after a loved one dies, we quite often are in a dark valley. They are times of scarcity as our bodies reject food and comfort. So I think we say this out loud on those occasions to remind ourselves of the sort of God that we serve, one who is with us, even on our hardest and our worst days. I said to a friend of mine that God was dusting the bookcases, fluffing the couch pillows, maybe folding towels fresh from the dryer, but with her. Our God is one who comes to us in our form to experience what it is to be human and to love and to suffer as we do. Just as the Israelites wandered in exile, they too are given the hope that Isaiah almost sings to them in the poetry of the 25th chapter. God is with us. This, all of this, what is happening around the world and right here in our town, it is not God's dream for us. But peel back the curtain and peek inside, and look, there it is. God intends that all of God's creatures should gather as one, that everyone should be invited to the table with old grudges and warring factions and violent instincts set aside. And so our present suffering is endured because of our hope that God will empower us to act, because of our desire for God to break into this story somewhere and save someone. Or maybe just help us know when to break in, when to stand up, when to shout, and how to save. The 70 pairs of shoes on your front porch right now speak to that hope and to your empowerment. What else can we do and how? Thankfully, we have a bit of an outline to follow. We don't have to do it alone. We can start this work right here at 524 Washington Street by gathering together and bringing and making our own praise and our own thanksgiving for the God that we love. That is how Isaiah started today, with praise for who God is. We can and we will move to the altar and we'll recall the saving deeds of God, specifically in the sending of Jesus to walk among us and to give us life. We will partake of holy food that is meant to strengthen and to comfort us. After all, this is how Isaiah continues that story. And the psalm picks up and sings along, a table open to all. And as we go out, we'll have to keep looking for glimmers of God at work here and now, among us and in us. We must ask God how we can help, and then obey the answer. Isaiah says we have waited for the Lord and that he has come to save us. The psalm says that surely the goodness and mercy of the Lord will follow us. Those are statements that we can believe because I know that we have witnessed them in our own lives. I'll give you a hint on how to find God at work. Sniff the air as you leave the sanctuary and smell the food that's being made for anyone at all to come and eat. We can do our own good work too in the name of God, because then we show God to others. We make real for them the love and desire of God, even if they don't know it. And we make manifest the goodness and mercy that God has promised us. We can pay off school lunch accounts. We can continue to shelter and tend our families and our friends and those who do not have anyone at all, inviting all to our banquet. Jared spoke to you last week of walls being broken down and trampled, of lush vineyards that yield good grapes. Those walls, the ones that were broken, they were your walls, and they were my walls too, and the walls of the church. And it is right and good that God should burn our hedges and devour the things that are not good fruit among us. It is fair that God should demand that we stop simply waiting and incarnate our faith. We have the choice to respond to the invitation of God, the same invitation that was issued in Matthew's Gospel, one that was largely ignored by the invited guests, one that comes from a God who seeks to provide for us, to be in covenant with us. And we must realize that the call of God is more than a call to attend church. It is more than a call to social justice work. It is a call that is about belonging for all people. It is a calling of God's people back to God. It's about fulfilling our end of the covenant that God made with us. And I think it's also a call that beckons us homeward, to the banquet that has been prepared for us and for an ever-growing company of siblings with whom we walk this road. And so, church, with our protective hedges burned and our walls in rubble, we have no choice but to endure, to learn, to change, and then to act. With the world on fire and hurting and blood everywhere, we have no choice but to keep working. I think it's easier if we look for the hope that exists in spite of that all. God is with us. These words might be familiar to you. I hope they are, because you heard them just a minute ago. But when I read the lectionary, they brought tears to my eyes, because Paul's letter to the church that he founded in Philippi reminded me so much of you. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing these things that you have learned and received and heard and seen, and the God of peace will be with you all. Amen.